All right. Well, welcome everyone and happy Saturday. This is Jenny Lusby, CEO and founder of Pure V. Super excited to mix things up a little bit with you guys this week. We're actually doing something that we don't normally do. We're actually having a 9 o'clock in the morning Saturday call. By the way, this was Dr. DeSilva's idea. So if you guys are still waking up, we can blame Dr. D. He said, let's have some fun this Saturday and, educate everyone. So that is absolutely what we're doing. You guys grab your coffee, grab your notepads, send out a quick reminder. But you guys, we have Dr. DeSilva joining us live this morning from New Jersey. If some of you are guests, maybe you're going to catch this on the replay. A little introduction about Dr. Derek DeSilva. First and foremost, he is absolutely world renowned. This gentleman travels all over the world, sharing his knowledge, his wisdom, in both Western medicine as well as Eastern medicine. My gosh, he's been in integrative medicine for what, 39 years? I think we need to update our slides, Dr. D. I don't know where the
Yeah,
time is
it's a
flying,
long
but
time.
uh,
Just
going
put a
on
long time,
39
Jenny.
years, you
That's
guys. So
it.
but anyway, you guys, he's a past president of the American Nutraceutical Association. He also is on the teaching faculty of the JFK Medical Center. He has been a recipient of one of the most prestigious awards in medicine. That's called the Allen Mintz Award for Excellence. My gosh, he travels all over the world conducting seminars, actually teaching and educating other colleagues and other physicians. So we are super blessed, super honored, Dr. D, to have you as our Chief Medical Officer here at Pure V. And so I have no idea what is up your sleeve this morning. I know we're like, we have no ideas. People were texting me, hey, what's he going to be talking about? I have no idea. So
Just a surprise. Just
it's
a
a
surprise.
surprise. So, you guys, with that, I'm going to turn it over to my dear friend, business partner, and Dr. DeSilva. Take it away, my friend.
Thank you very much, Jenny. I appreciate it. And sorry I had to wake all you guys up this morning. This is Jenny and Tony and I were talking during the week, and I said, "Hey, let's do a Saturday morning call." And they said, "Sure, why not? Let's do it." So she's right. Jenny's right. This was my idea, and if I had to get you folks up early, my apologies. So I want to share with you this presentation, and I'm just going to pluck out a couple of slides from you. I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but this particular presentation is a lecture that I did in Bangkok, Thailand last year. It has to do with something called endothelial dysfunction and cardiovascular disease and aging, and the role that your blood vessels play when it comes to aging. I'm doing a similar presentation to this in Dubai this October. And it's amazing to me how the world is getting interested in the world of integrated medicine. Let me give you a little bit of background. So about 10, 15 years ago, I traveled all over Asia with a very, very, very wealthy businessman. I was one of three of his personal physicians. Believe it or not, he had a 727 that we traveled on. And his plane, I'll never forget this, his plane was parked next to Donald Trump's plane. And he and Donald Trump were buddies, and they used to talk about how whose engine was bigger, whose engines on the plane were bigger. But it was very interesting that we traveled all over Asia. And at that time, people in Asia, and even in the EU, said, we want to be like the US. We want our medicine to be like the US. We want everything to be like the US. And I thought to myself, your medicine that you use here in the Far East, in places like Malaysia, Indonesia, Japan, China, they were that medicine is 5,000 years old. Why do you want to abandon that and start using a bunch of drugs? Now, again, a lot of you that know me know that medicine, prescription medicines have a role. And my biggest issue is that I think that the medicines that we use are overused. I think they're overutilized, and we're not going back to the basics. So this morning, I would like to talk with you about vascular disease or what is called vascular dysfunction. I want to go over something that is very important. The vascular system or blood vessels. When I say blood vessels, I'm talking about arteries, I'm talking about veins, I'm talking about capillaries, I'm talking about the lymphatic system, I'm talking about the entire vascular system in the body is about 60,000 miles of blood vessels between the arteries, the veins, the capillaries, the lymphatics, etc. It's about 60,000 miles of blood vessels. I think it goes around the earth 3 or 4 times. It's something like that. Every one of those surfaces, every one of the surfaces of the blood vessels, arteries, veins, capillaries, lymphatics, they're all covered with what is called an endothelial layer. The endothelial layer is this layer. Now, you have to kind of visualize this. I'm going to give you some perspective here. This right here is called the lumen. This is the opening. This is the opening of the blood vessel. This right here is a cross section. So if you have a blood vessel that looks like this, you cut it and you look at it under the microscope, and this is what you're going to see right here. Okay. So this is the opening. This right here is what is called the endothelial layer, or right here. This is the endothelial layer. And this layer is a single-celled layer that looks like shingles on the way that the cells are stacked, looks like shingles on a roof. There's a slight overlay of all of those cells so that it's not end to end. There's a slight overlay of these cells. Now, this picture, these two pictures, are what are called photomicrographs. This is new. I shouldn't say brand new. This technology goes back quite a few years, but it's relatively new. We have not seen this layer in vivo before, meaning we've not seen this layer alive, if you will, before. So this particular picture is a very, very interesting picture. Now, what's unique about this photomicrograph is this right here. This is a hairy, slippery, gel-like layer called the glycocalyx. Some of you may have heard me talk about this in the past, but this layer was discovered by a scientist that I have had the pleasure of working with about 20 years ago. I have been working on this project for half of my career, which is this particular project I've been working on for the past 20 years. And I understand this layer. I understand what these gel-like, hairy gel-like projections are made of. And I also understand and know what destroys it. So we'll get into a little bit of that in just a minute. So this particular layer is, as I said, a hairy, slippery, gel-like layer that covers the inside, right here, covers the inside of every single blood vessel. What's the relevance of this? The relevance, and you can compare this to a fish. A fish that comes out of the water is very slippery, right? For those of you that have ever been fishing or touched a fish that comes right out of the water, it's very slippery. It's almost like got this very slippery gel-like layer. That layer on the fish is called the glycocalyx layer. Our eyes, the surface of the eye, the inside of the eye, has a glycocalyx layer. Our intestines have a slippery gel-like glycocalyx layer. All right. And this is throughout the body. And obviously, every single blood vessel also contains this layer. Now, this layer is a layer that is very much alive. Now, this is a cartoon. This is the same thing as this, only it's in an animated form. These blue lines are this layer here, this hairy, slippery, gel-like layer. All right. So the blue lines here are that. This right here is what is called the endothelial layer. These things with the little dots in it, these are the endothelial cells, which would be here, right here, this layer here. All right. So, what's the purpose of this? If this layer is intact, once again, if this layer is intact, it doesn't matter what flows through the blood vessel. It could be fat, it could be cholesterol, it could be any kind, platelets right here. It could be anything. But if this layer is intact, it cannot damage this endothelial layer. Because when this layer gets damaged and you lose the blue lines, when you lose the blue lines and it looks like this is where the damage, these particles, these platelets, and all of the other bad things that are in our blood will go and attach and detach and separate those shingles that are on the roof. And this is where clots and fibrin and everything start to collect. All right. So if this layer is intact, it helps regulate surface inflammation. It helps regulate the surface, meaning the roof, the shingles don't allow water to come into the house because you need this layer to protect the shingles. It also, this layer right here, also triggers the production of nitric oxide. Now, how does that happen? I'll get into that in just a little bit. But you can see the significance of this layer. Now, again, this layer was only discovered about 20 years ago. In medicine, that is very, very new. Very new. And I've presented this this data, this information to cardiologists at various international meetings, and very, very few people, if anybody, when I was in Thailand, there were 800 doctors there. I asked for a show of hands of who's heard of this. Nobody raised their hand. So this is very new information. This information is so critical that if we understand the physiology of what is going on here, we will now be able to understand cardiovascular disease. So, what damages, what destroys this particular layer? What damages and destroys this layer is number one, aging. One of the worst culprits that damages this layer, is diabetes. Diabetes absolutely devastates this layer. In fact, next week, this coming week, I am going to be in Houston doing a presentation on this and the role of protecting this layer when it comes to kidney disease. Because this is one of the mechanisms of how the kidneys get destroyed and people end up on dialysis. So, what damages this layer once again? Age, diabetes, high blood pressure, smoking, sedentary lifestyle, and any kind of inflammatory process, infections, etc., etc. So anything that produces inflammation will damage this slippery gel-like layer. And once we lose this layer, then the endothelium, this layer here, now becomes vulnerable. And this is where plaque begins. This is where hardening of the arteries, plaque, blockages, all of these things begin. Because as I said before, if this layer is intact, you can't form a blood clot. You just can't, because it's a slippery gel-like layer and the blood just flows right through it. But if you lose this buffer, things will now stick to this layer. And again, what damages it? Blood sugar, elevated blood sugar, diabetes, smoking. The combination, folks, of diabetes and cigarette smoking, and then you add a little bit of high blood pressure to that, devastates. When I say devastates, devastates this particular layer. That's why in the dialysis unit, our hospital has a huge dialysis unit. In the dialysis unit, guaranteed, over 90% of the people in that unit, I shouldn't say 90, I would say 80 to 85% of people that are on dialysis in that unit have a combination of diabetes and high blood pressure. That combination is absolutely devastating to this layer. Now, what else does this layer do? The other thing that this layer does is that, believe it or not, it makes nitric oxide. It's called shear stress or shear force. Again, this right here is these hairy projections here that are going through here. Visualize these as those blue lines, okay? As blood flows across those blue lines as blood flows here. Sorry. As blood flows across this layer and blood flows this way, right? So it flows across this layer. As it flows across that layer, it triggers the production of nitric oxide through what is called the classic enzymatic enos pathway. So this is how nitric oxide is made in the body. All right. So if you don't have these blue lines, you can't make nitric oxide. It reduces the availability of nitric oxide. It increases what is called oxidative stress. It allows for leakage and damage to the endothelial layer. It increases the ability of platelets and all of these other bad things to stick to that layer and start to form blood clots. And this is the beginnings of heart disease. Now, I can get into much more detail. And if you look here, what helps this? Citrulline, arginine, norvaline, ornithine. What do we have? We have something called flow. Flow will help the body do what it needs to do. Now, the question here is, how do we, let me see if I can get to one of these other slides. The question is, how do we make our own nitric oxide? We can make our own nitric oxide if that endothelial layer is intact, right? If that endothelial layer is intact, our body can make nitric oxide from the blood flow over that layer. And if there's damage to that layer, this is where the problems begin. But the body is very smart. The body always has a backup mechanism, always. No matter what it is, the body has backup mechanisms. It's like the spare tire, right? We always have a spare tire. I'm not talking about the spare tire here. I'm talking about the body's ability to repair, heal, and regenerate. One of the other mechanisms of how we make nitric oxide, and I talked about this on Tuesday on the call, but here is a pictorial of what I talked about. When you eat food, whether it be beets, cauliflower, etc., our body has what are called, those foods contain something called nitrates. In the body, in your mouth, those nitrates are converted to nitrites, and that happens in the body. So bacteria in the oral cavity reduce nitrates to nitrites. Okay? What happens if you don't have the right good bacteria in your mouth? You can't make that conversion. These nitrites are then transported to the stomach, where gastric acid or hydrochloric acid in the stomach now converts the nitrites to nitric oxide. So that mechanism requires two things. It requires the right bacteria in your mouth, and it also requires hydrochloric acid in your stomach. So if you're taking an acid blocker, this is one of the things that's going to prevent that conversion of nitrites to nitric oxide. So making sure that you have the right flora, the right bacteria, good bacteria in your system, from your mouth to your stomach, through all of the intestines, small intestine, large intestine, etc., becomes a critical piece. So, taking a probiotic, trying to avoid acid blockers, making sure you don't use mouthwash, making sure that your mouth, your oral flora is optimal, making sure that you have enough acid in your stomach is optimal, is what is going to make this conversion of nitrates to nitrites to nitric oxide happen in your body. So there's two ways to do it. You can make sure that this is all working properly, and this is largely, not entirely, largely dependent on the good bacteria. And this back here is dependent on what? Preventing, controlling, maintaining healthy blood sugar and healthy blood pressure. So, as long as these things are working together, you're going to be okay. But this is where disease begins. If you have high levels of insulin, you will devastate this layer within minutes. So let's talk a little bit about what happens when you eat. So when you eat, this layer right here, this glycocalyx layer, and I'm just using an example. Let's say it's normally this thick. When you eat, it reduces in size. It's just physiology. It reduces in size, and then within 4 to 6 hours, it grows back. Okay? What happens if you're diabetic? If you are diabetic, this layer that is this thick, if you're diabetic, becomes this thin, and that now becomes your baseline. And then you eat, and what happens to this layer? You lose it. You lose it. So, if you are diabetic and your sugar is constantly elevated, you essentially lose the blue lines because it completely devastates that layer. And God forbid you smoke and you have high blood pressure. Forget it. Forget it. This layer gets completely devastated. This is why people with diabetes, high blood pressure, smoking, sedentary lifestyle, high insulin levels, overeating, this is why they have, or they're more predisposed to heart disease. So this layer takes between 4 and 6 hours to rebuild. Now, let me tell you a little story about me. So about 20 years ago, when I started looking at this, and if you remember back 15 to 20 years ago, do you remember everybody used to talk about grazing, eating small meals throughout the day? That was when that fad of eating those small meals happened. When I saw this information and when I saw this data, I said to myself, wow, If the glycocalyx layer takes 4 to 6 hours to rebuild, and I'm eating every 4 to 6 hours, it never gives it a chance to rebuild. It always is small. And then I thought to myself, and then fast forward 15 years, and now comes intermittent fasting, right? Intermittent fasting. So what I did was I stopped eating those small meals every 4 to 6 hours, and I went to eating 3 times a day. 3 times a day, I would have a little snack, something in between, but not like I used to eat. Then, 15 years ago, here comes intermittent fasting. And as soon as I heard that, folks, as soon as I heard that, it triggered in my brain that, wow, if I fast, it gives this layer plenty of time to rebuild. Because if the layer rebuilds in 4 to 6 hours, let's say it's even 8 hours, if it rebuilds in that period of time, if I'm doing intermittent fasting, it's fantastic. It really rebuilds this layer and it makes sense. And the whole thing just made sense to me. Why? Because when you do intermittent fasting, what happens to insulin levels? Right. Insulin levels come down. If insulin levels come down, this layer can be rebuilt. Just makes sense because you're reducing inflammation. You're decreasing the inflammatory component in your body. So the whole thing just made sense to me. It absolutely just triggered all kinds of thoughts in my own brain for my own health. So, and this is what I'm sharing with you today. There are benefits to controlling your blood sugar, having the right flora in your mouth, making sure you're supporting nitric oxide, and making sure that everything in your body is working together. So, this is why this whole thing is important and it just makes sense. And I've said this before, folks. You're not a kidney, a liver, a brain, and a lung. You are a system. You are a system that all works together. As long, and I have said this 1,000 times. And for those of you that have heard me say this 1,000 times, I hope you now understand a little bit more with regard to the why and the physiology of the why. So there is, and then we come back to, ourselves. And then we come back to Pure V. Jenny, would you please bring up, if you can, the slides that if you're still here, would you
Of
please?
course, I'm still
Yes,
here. Are
would you
you
would
kidding
you
me?
bring up would you bring up the slides, dear, of what you sent me that I used on Tuesday?
Can you see my screen right now, Dr. D?
Uh, Not yet.
No. Okay. What I may have to do is
Oh, I gotta stop sharing. Sorry.
yeah, just and I actually will make myself a panelist. Hang on one second.
How do I stop sharing, dear?
Just you don't worry about it. Just for one second,
Okay.
I'm gonna actually hang on. This is crazy. What amazing information, by the way. That was incredible.
Thank you.
All those years of nursing school, never even heard of the endothelial helix. Okay, hang on one second, Dr. D. What I'm
Sure,
going to
sure.
do is I have you as a panelist right now, so I just need to change that back temporarily. Hang on.
I'm afraid that if I go back to my other screen that I'm going to lose everything.
No problem. Here we go. Let's see. This should do it.
Yeah, I think you're
Okay, so
close
here's
now.
that. And then I'm going to share my screen. Hang on. Let's,
Yeah, Conda is saying yes. Now she understands. Ooh, that looks nice.
oh, yeah. And that,
Uh, the why. And I think Conda and Cheryl and everybody else that's on here, Brian and Amy and everybody, Mona. I mean, if you understand the why, I think things just start to make sense, right? We talk about and we always go back to our top health problems. And folks, again, please excuse me for being redundant. I really apologize for that. But the point of my redundancy is that when we started this company, I will never forget Jenny and Tony saying to me, we want to deal and tackle the top 5 health issues in this country: cardiovascular disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, gastrointestinal problems, and vitamin D deficiency. And that's how we developed the products. And that's why we have the products that we have today. All right. Now, as I said before, controlling your blood sugar, ladies and gentlemen. And again, you don't need to be diabetic per se. You could you could have an elevated insulin level. And I'll bet you that a lot of you don't know what your insulin level is. You need to know that. You need to know that as part of your blood work. What is your insulin level? And the range on the insulin level, by the way, on the blood work ranges from something like 8 or 9 up to 25. 25 is crazy high. What I want to do is I want to keep ideally my patient's insulin levels around 7 or low or less. So, I will be okay with 10 and below, but even 10 is getting up a little bit too high. I want it lower. Because why? The insulin will damage the glycocalyx. Because blood sugars, if your insulin is high, that means that your blood sugar is high. And what's going to happen? That layer, that protective glycocalyx layer, is going to be damaged. The other thing and that's why we have and we use the glucose after you eat twice a day, after breakfast, after dinner, right? What about the flow? The reason for the flow, citrulline, arginine, norvaline, ornithine. What does it do? Well, it helps your body boost the production and support a healthy production of nitric oxide. And remember, if you're giving your body nitric oxide support, you're rebuilding that glycocalyx because you're reducing insulin, you're controlling your blood pressure. What's going to happen? Your nitric oxide levels are going to go up, and now the vasculature, that endothelial layer, remember that layer below that hairy gel-like layer, is going to be protected. It's going to be protected. What about the probiotic? Well, what do you need the probiotic for? For your mouth flora, because remember, nitrates are converted to nitrites in your mouth. And nitrites are converted to nitric oxide where? In your belly. What do you need for that? You need a healthy flora. Enter our probiotic. Okay? What about stress? What about the role, and I didn't mention that, I apologize for not mentioning this. What about the role of stress on the glycocalyx? Folks, I can't begin to tell you how devastating stress and cortisol is to that layer. We talk about diabetes, smoking, high blood pressure. Stress is also right up there when it comes to damaging and destroying this protective glycocalyx layer. So, mood with the mushrooms, the different types of mushrooms, reishi, lion's mane, cordyceps, these mushrooms have a protective adaptogenic effect to relax your cortisol and support the levels of stress in your body. Okay. Of course, Pure Max. I always have to think of Pure Max as wow. Why isn't everybody, look, 70%. I was reading some new statistics. That number is going up. The drug companies are trying to say that obesity is coming down. Yeah, coming down because of the shots. At what expense? What I want to do is I want to figure out, and I will. And by the way, I'm meeting with some scientists this week that I've worked with in Houston to talk about this. I want to figure out how these drugs, what effect these drugs, the injections, have on the glycocalyx. I will bet you that these drugs devastate this layer. Because why? You can see how people age, right? You can see it in their face and you can see how they age. So I will at some point figure out how to study this and study these folks. So again, ladies and gentlemen, and then vitamin D, right? Vitamin D on the glycocalyx layer, again, supporting the immune system, uh, supporting our mental cognitive health for the cardiovascular disease, killing the bad cells in our body. I mean, vitamin D is just a given. We have the solution. Could you change the slide, please, Jenny? Next one. We have the solution. And the solution is, next slide, next slide. This is the solution. I spoke to a doctor the other day, and he was intrigued by PureScan. He said to me, "Wow." And I was explaining, transdermal optical imaging to him. And he said, "Derek, why doesn't every person and every doctor's office have this?" I said, first of all, we are way ahead of our time. We are way ahead of our time. Folks, artificial intelligence is everywhere. Is You can't turn on the TV or listen to whatever you listen to or read a magazine that doesn't have something to do with artificial intelligence. It's incredible. We've got the best. And what about these products? What about the products that we have? Every single one of them, mechanism of action, will help support the health of the glycocalyx. We have the solution. You need to take control of your life, of your health. And again, you've heard me say this 1,000 times. Your wealth is useless unless you have your health. We will help you with your wealth, but we will also help you with your health so that you can enjoy your wealth. Jenny, thank you.
Dr. D, that was absolutely brilliant. Amazing. My God. I think that might have been one of my favorite talks. That was just a brilliant job of how you explained all that. So, I do want to let everyone know that we are also doing a June promotion, you guys. This is going to start June 1st. This is going to run, I think, all the way through the month of June. What we're going to do is this wellness pack. We are super excited to expose people to every single one of these products. As Dr. DeSilva mentioned, all the benefits of using these products together. And by the way, they're safe to use together. They've been designed to actually work synergistically together. But for the month of June, this wellness pack, you guys, instead of being $319 for a temporary special, is going to be $259. So that is unbelievable. That's just a lot of product. You also get the Pure Scan app for a full month for free. So this is going to be this will actually roll out tomorrow morning. What do you think about that, Dr. D? Do you like
I
that?
love it. I
Okay.
love it. I really do. You know what, Jenny? And I think you and I discussed this, right? And I know that this is one of your favorite packs because it makes sense, right? It makes sense that the probiotic, the flow, the glucose, the mood, the D3K, they all work together. If you
Right.
will, they all flow together and it all just all makes sense. So I think that's a great idea.
Absolutely. Well, guys, again, thank you, Dr. DeSilva, for joining us live on your Saturday morning. My goodness, this was so much fun. We definitely recorded this, so we will get that posted up today. Feel free, you guys, to share this recording. I think this was a great way to really encapsulate how all of these products work to improve your overall health. So, again, you guys have a wonderful rest of your Saturday. Enjoy your weekend. And we will start this promotion tomorrow morning. Thank you, Dr. D.
You're very welcome, Jenny. And thank you to all of you for being here this morning. I really, really appreciate it. God bless. Have a wonderful weekend.